Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Idyllwild Forum's interview with Cindy Brooks as part of the six-part mental hygiene workshop series that we're sponsoring in Idyllwild, California through the months of September and October 2022. Cindy Brooks is a licensed marriage and family therapist, somatic experiencing practitioner, and certified addiction treatment counselor. She's registered as a yoga teacher and trained as an equine interactional professional. She specializes in the treatment of trauma and addiction in its many forms. As a somatic experiencing practitioner, she brings this therapeutic modality into group and private practice sessions. She has assisted and coordinated somatic experiencing trainings through the country alongside the founder, Peter Levine. Most recently, she has brought a somatic experiencing training to the town hall in Idyllwild, with another one coming up in November. Cindy most recently completed a certificate in eco-psychology and became a facilitator of the Work That Reconnects, developed by Joanna Macy. She lectures to families and patients at various treatment centers and hospitals in the Idyllwild Palm Springs area. And Cindy has been in private practice for over 15 years and conducts experiential retreats in the mountains near and around Idyllwild, California. She believes now more than ever in the value of community and the importance of connecting with the natural world for growth and well-being, something that we very much share her passion for. I'm interviewing Cindy as she'll be speaking this or conducting a workshop this Saturday, September 24th, 10:30 to 12:30 at Butterfield Amphitheater in Idyllwild. And the topics of that include live like a mountain, reconnect with self, reconnect with others, reconnect with the natural environment, and experiencing grief as a natural process. And we want to make sure you know that this is available on a pay-what-you-can basis. It's sponsored by the Idyllwild Forest Health Project as part of our ongoing effort to develop local wisdom, connection, resilience, and agency. Whatever you can afford, you are welcome to attend. And if you've got kids, bring them along too. Tima Ivanova will be also conducting some, at the same time, some co-concurrent workshops for youth. So come on down this Saturday and welcome Cindy.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, so I think, you know, I kind of gave the blurb already about the actual, the event on Saturday. So maybe we could talk a little bit about your background and how you got started working as a therapist.
Well, I have 4 children, and part of after raising them and seeing some of the different struggles with myself and with my children, I decided to go back to school. I had received counseling and therapy and thought, you know what, if I could help some people as I've been helped, that would be really cool. So I went back and got my master's degree. I had originally had a bachelor's in fine arts from many years ago. And then I decided to go back and get my master's in counseling psychology. So I really initially started out sharing art and psychology together. And then when I was in my practicum in my graduate program, I met a woman that was doing somatic experiencing. And I went to an intro to see a particular facilitator. And then I ended up meeting Peter Levine. And this was back in like 2010. And I became really fascinated by the work. It made so much sense to me, and I felt that it was really needed for our world at that time, even more so now. But I felt back then, wow, this would be just a great thing to add to my practice, thinking that I was taking the training for my clients, when in actuality, it was life-changing for me. And so I just really think it's a fantastic way of healing. And then as I was over the years working with that, I've always been an outdoors person. I enjoy camping. I was living in Orange County at the time. I started hating it there, and no offense to anybody that's from there, but I really wanted to be in an area that had more community and that was smaller and had forests and had animals. And I lived in Mammoth for a little while, and then the snow got a little bit too much for me. And so I ended up just kind of going there during the summer, and then eventually migrated here. I had a cabin here for about 8 years, but I've lived here permanently almost 4. So that's basically, and it's interesting when I look back as a kid, I found so much solace in the woods. I was a pretty alone kid, and it's just like come full circle for me, and the importance of, and I think we've gotten away from that somewhat. So I really hope to do a workshop that helps people. I know a lot of people live up here are very passionate about the outdoors, but I hope to, get people to see again the importance, since we've been kind of isolated and alone for a few years. So that's that in a nutshell. But
So maybe we should chat a little bit about you're actually working with Peter Levine. I happen to have his book right here.
Oh, you certainly do.
An Unspoken Voice. I haven't read it. I've read parts of it, and it's one of those books that's been on my shelf for a while, but I'm really interested in this idea, this somatic experiencing. I did something that back in the 80s was called emotional body work, and I think that's kind of a related practice of sort of really accessing trauma and so on through the body, rather than just through kind of talking about it and through therapy. And I found it for myself really helpful as a young man. In the book, Peter talks about this accident that he went through, where he was kind of hit by a young driver, and his body was trembling and so on. And would you like to talk a bit about the whole somatic?
Sure. So that particular incident with Peter, and the trembling and so forth, comes from the idea that animals in the wild, okay, and he studied animals in the wild for probably close to 40 years before developing somatic experiencing, and the idea that animals in their natural environment do not have PTSD, and they are constantly in life-threatening situations. And so what the difference is, and we are animals. So his interest was like, why did they just have the innate ability? We all have the innate ability to heal from trauma, but we have more of an evolved brain, and our pesky neocortex sometimes gets in the way of holding on to things and like not letting things release in a way that animals just do and don't care. Like we fall, we immediately jump up, right? But if you ever watch a bird hit a window, they lay there a while, right? They kind of regroup, they orient to their space, they orient to their environment, they move their head and neck, and then they fly away, right? They don't just jump up, right? So his experience of being hit by the car in the crosswalk, he had enough knowledge in his own, work to realize that his body went into a state of shock, and he allowed it to shake, tremble, do what it needed to do to renegotiate and to come back to a state of stabilization in his nervous system. I mean, we're all set up with a threat response cycle in our bodies to orient to the danger. And if some way or some reason we can't fight or flee a situation, that energy can get stuck in the body. and we freeze, or we shut down, or we become depressed, or we dissociate, just to be able to, that's how we, and all nervous systems are different. So it just kind of depends on your environment, and, whether there's shame involved, whether there's ridicule, whether there's a not healthy home environment, that we learn certain patterns to survive that don't always serve us later on in life. I think that's an example that trembling is like, if animals do that sort of thing and they're not like worried about someone noticing, right? There's a really great video. It's called Polar Bear Alert. And it kind of shows what an animal does when a polar bear actually gets tranquilized for study purposes and is running and kind of chomping its jaw as it gets tranquilized. And then they do tag its ear and so forth. And then when it's coming out of the anesthesia, it's running and still doing this with its jaw, right? Chomping. And then it takes these huge, huge breaths and starts shaking and resets its nervous system, and then it's fine. So it's pretty fascinating. But we have this kind of, I don't know, feeling that we can't necessarily let that happen because we might be viewed as weird, or I don't know, or we must carry on, kind of thing. So anyway, that's a part of that book that's really interesting, and it just makes sense of how we kind of don't allow ourselves to kind of do what our bodies want to do.
When the paramedics talked to him, they said that they would often medicate people, or immediately, and kind of close them down. And the woman said to him, "I guess maybe we shouldn't be doing this." And he said, "It's actually better to let the body go into shock and tremble as to shake that off."
Yeah. And more doctors are taking the trainings, which is always fascinating and interesting. It's exciting to see medical professionals, I mean, you would think they might know this, but it's it's just the idea of, like, even after I've done the training and I've had to have a surgical procedure, I tell them, don't wrap me in blankets. Let me shake, let me tremble, let me come out, like, and there's a whole protocol around that going into anesthesia around as you go in, so you come out, similar to the polar bear.
So in terms of somatic experiencing, what is that process like for somebody who's never gone through that process with you? How would you,
Well, I probably would just introduce some psychoeducation around the nervous system, the autonomic part of your nervous system that happens automatically when there is a real or perceived threat. Okay, that we are born with this in our bodies to fight or flee, and then rest and digest. And when there is something that appears dangerous, real or perceived, our bodies will go into this threat response cycle. So I will give some psychoeducation around that. And I would also just mention to people the idea that I might often ask, as you say that, or as you hear that, or as you have that thought or whatever, what sensations do you notice in your body? And they may say, my heart's fluttery. If they aren't aware, or if it's too much for them, it might be more of external body awareness at first. Like, how does your shirt feel on your skin? Or what do you notice on the, rather than going totally in right away. And for those that aren't familiar at all, I might give them a little menu of words, like a list of sensation words that they have, like, on them or with them, that they can say: bubbly, jagged, frosty, like there's different, and rather, or hot, cold. And then we explore that sensation and we spend some time with it, and we allow it to maybe shift or move in some way. And it expands one's capacity to hold more discomfort or more uncomfortable or unpleasant sensations that might come up around specific topics. And then the bandwidth of the nervous system increases, if you will. It takes more to activate or overwhelm the system. So you live like a fuller, more expansive life. And you don't need to use other things to make that go away, like addictions and so forth. So, yeah.
So you mentioned fight or flight. Isn't freeze another thing that people...
Freeze is another thing, yeah. So fight and flight is if you say, for instance, there is one of these items of danger and you can't fight or flee the situation, often the system can freeze. It can also, since that book was written, he has added appease. He's also added fawn. And then freeze is the body kind of shutting down, or, kind of just almost tonic immobility. Okay. Freeze can also, which is interesting, in our world today, show up as kind of a form of active freeze, where you're going through life, functional freeze, if you will. You're going through life, you're busy, you're doing all these things, you're productive, but you're really not present for your life. There's a lot of people in functional freeze. Because, and you slow them down and then emotions surface, and they've just kind of managed that way.
I heard somebody speaking recently, I'm not even sure where, but about the idea that maybe our whole culture is kind of frozen right now in the face of these cascading crises that we're facing, climate and et cetera.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. Frozen, and also just an underlying sense of uneasiness, okay, is what I'm seeing with my clients and in my work. Not that it can be named, right? And it's not necessarily conscious. It can be around certain things, but it's also, if we take COVID, for example, if we just use that as an example, there is that innate, threat response cycle that orients to the danger. You're walking on a trail, you see a black squiggly thing, and you make in a nanosecond the decision whether you're going to run or what you're going to do. Okay. And with COVID or other things that are unseen, you can't orient to the danger. You don't know where it is. And it's very unnerving to the system. It's like, I don't know, is it in this supermarket? Is it in the air here? Is it, on that, anywhere? And the same with, there's climate change, but it's also that sense of like, what can I do about the climate? What can I do? But, this like agency of wanting to fight or flee, but not knowing necessarily, what to do. So we hope that area does not become frozen, because we want people to have like an active sense of hope, right? Like, what can I do? What is my part that I might be the smallest thing, Don't buy plastic bottles, just like, anyway.
And then on the other hand, it seems like we also have this through social media, especially this increase of very binary thinking, with the polarization that's going along with that. Is that connected somehow as well, would you say?
I would say that's also unrest, and also the idea of, people not being able to accept maybe other people, the whole social media thing, I try to avoid as much as possible. I'm going to be honest, I just don't really want to engage in that and opinions, and I don't know, it's just not something but I do think the split in the world, this idea of coming back together as a unified, definitely has a part with the two polarized, kind of things. It's important for us to get more back into the middle and connection, and viewing humanity as one, right, rather than sides.
Yeah, I just wondered, in terms of what you were saying earlier about this sort of, people want to be able to know, do they fight or do they run? And maybe the binary thinking is like this way to very quickly see friend or foe, is this person?
Yes.
And then when in reality, these issues that we're all dealing with are so much more complex. And as you pointed out, also just kind of hard to even get your head around.
And they're all interconnected, in a way. And I think that, I guess some of my frustrations with it, if there were just some of the funds that are put towards some things, that could be put towards climate change or helping the environment, instead of shooting rockets to Mars or whatever, that we could probably solve, help this, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know, that doesn't really relate to what you were asking, but it's just a brief thing that I don't know, some stuff like that is just kind of hard for me to swallow.
Misplaced priorities.
Yeah.
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 So Peter Levine also talks about these twin sisters of mercy, embodiment and awareness. He says, along with the method I have described throughout the book, we're the conjoined twin sisters of embodiment and awareness. This asset, even beyond its crucial role in regulating stress and healing trauma, is a master tool for personal enrichment and self-discovery. My job here is to entice you to take your body seriously enough to learn a bit more about its promptings. Yet I also want you to encourage you to hold it lightly enough to engage it as a powerful ally in transforming intense, negative, or uncomfortable emotions, and so to experience what it's like to truly embody goodness and joy. I love that section. Would you?
Yeah. Well, just in that for me is this idea of being able to experience all of it. Okay. So when we talk about a regulated, or I don't want to say healthy, but a regulated nervous system, it's not like walking around like everything is just grand and I'm in this like state of calm all the time. And it's the idea that you can have some of those unpleasant feelings. You can have some of those unpleasant sensations. You can have grief. You can have good days. You can have bad days. You can have all of it. It's becoming aware of it and then not wanting to necessarily be in one place all the time. You don't want to walk around dissociated all the time, right? But aware of when you might check out, right? And aware of when you come back and why did I go? And noticing what sensations show up in the body to give us signs, that something is overwhelming. There's a lot of research that he's done around people who have multiple or complex issues of trauma over and over again. And part of that is the sympathetic nervous system being on high alert all the time. So if it's on high alert all the time, it doesn't really know when danger is coming. So then it happens again and again and again, so the idea of learning to bring that parasympathetic in, that rest and digest, that ability to kind of tap into that a bit, knowing that and that's also where the social engagement piece comes in, right? Of noticing how the system is settled when we are in connection with other things, human, more than human, whatever. My dog's making weird noises right now, but like just that idea of, how do we feel all of it and be okay? Like, I don't know where or who made up the idea that you can't be uncomfortable. It's just become such a thing to quick take this or do this or don't feel that, or it's all good. And I think that quote that you just said speaks to that. And you touch upon it, it can be too overwhelming at first to touch on something that's really horrific or very uncomfortable, but you put your toe in the water and then you take it out, right? And you put more of your foot in and then you take it out, and there's that's a term called pendulation that he refers to as well. So, or titration, actually. Titration and pendulation.
I think that's a great segue to move over towards Joanna Macy. And I could see how going from Peter Levine, you would be attracted to Joanna Macy's work. She talks about, I have a quote here, there are hard things to face in our world today if we want to be of use. Gratitude, when it's real, offers no blinders. On the contrary, in the face of devastation and tragedy, it can ground us. Especially when we're scared, it can hold us steady for the work to be done. And then she talks about the activist's inner journey appears like a spiral interconnecting 4 successive stages or movements that feed into each other. Opening to gratitude, owning our pain for the world, seeing with new eyes, and then going forth.
And that I actually did a painting that I will prop up at the workshop this weekend, of that I use the metaphor of a dandelion, where the gratitude is the roots, honoring our pain is more of the growth, and moving through up into the spiral of the dandelion, yellow and bright, seeing with new eyes, and then the little wisp that blow off the dandelion as going forth. And the idea of, if we don't honor our pain, or which for the purpose of this workshop, talking a bit about grief as a process, a natural process, we are not living our fullest. We're not expansive. The idea of honoring our pain to move forward, to see with new eyes, to go forth and see what difference we can make, with a sense of, transforming kind of our despair for the world into a sense of active hope.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I feel like maybe we should kind of say a little bit about who Joanna Macy is for people who aren't familiar with her work, and her writings and her,
Well, she has written a book called Active Hope, and she's also written a book called The Coming Back to Life, which there are a lot of experiential activities. I've only got 2 hours this weekend, so we're going to do a brief kind of truth mandala thing, or just kind of explain that using elements from the natural world. So I just, she's an activist. She's probably, I think, 94, something like that.
Born in 1929, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're getting close to,
yeah. And so I had the opportunity of going in my eco-psychology program to Boonville, California, Northern California, and live on the land in this little structure that I loved, and be able to do some of this work that reconnects with facilitators of hers. She was not there herself. But as I participated in the Work That Reconnects over a course of 3 days, doing a variety of her activities that are in the book Coming Back to Life, I found so much more, even though, there is that feeling of what can I do? There was so much more of a feeling leaving there of active hope, and the ability to think of what little things I could possibly do to help others to see that as well. And then from there, I took the facilitator training program, and she came to our graduation. And so I haven't worked directly with her, but I have been in her presence. I have worked many times directly with Peter Levine, but not Joanna. But I just feel like some of her quotes and some of the YouTube things, I mean, if you're interested, you can definitely see a lot of her talks and things on moving towards the great turning. And I think that that's what you even spoke to. She speaks of, business as usual being the industrial growth society, as kind of, it's coincides with what I shared about functional freeze. Like this, we're just going through life in this business as usual manner. And how can we pause, right, and reconnect with one another, and what can we do to be part of the great turning, right, rather than just stay in this business as usual kind of place in this industrial growth society. So those are the pieces of her work that I really resonate with, because I want to help do that.
She also talks about deep time.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of like not just being caught up in this,
right?
Yes.
And some of the activities that we did would actually, we would sit with like 3 people, and one person was like an ancestor, and we were a present day person, and then another person was an animal, and another person was a predecessor, and we come up with an issue and answer that issue from the viewpoint of deep time, like 7 generations ago. How would that have been managed? And then also further ahead in the future. It was really, really cool. So there's a lot of different activities that are mentioned in her book, but also that I hope to personally provide in some capacity to this community, and be able to do day-long things moving forward. Hey, let's do a deep time workshop, or let's do I mean, that's really where I hope to transition more of my work going forward into outdoor spaces, doing that stuff.
So in terms of this movement of in your own life of going
Mhm.
from like focusing on personal trauma and then maybe
Mhm.
family trauma, addiction,
Mhm.
to this larger picture of the state of the planet and our species right now and so on. Would you see that as a developmental movement, like as one heals oneself, then one gains the capacity to expand the
Mhm.
circles of agency and so on.
Mhm. I
And
agree.
and is that healing in it, does that work both ways, I guess, is kind of what I'm asking.
Both ways for like, for I can say that if the world continues as a traumatized, in my opinion, world, traumatized people traumatize people. Okay.
Right.
So the idea of my own growth and capacity, I can see changes in my own children. I can see changes in my children with my grandchildren. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. I can see it at SE trainings when I've met a person at the beginning of the training, and then I see them at advanced, or I see them when they're getting it's a 3-year program. It's a long thing. And when I see them at the end getting their SEP certificate, how they have changed brings me great joy. It's not as a result of me, it's a result of their work, but it's the work doing its work, if you will. And then those people go out and have other clients and other people. And, I really think that it has that is hopeful to me, to see a difference in the world from moving from a less, you know, not looking at at what's happening and just carrying on, versus like kind of taking a look, and then being able to use those things with your own families and your own colleagues and people at work. And I mean, we have dentists and then we have school teachers taking SC. We've got all sorts, and I just think it's fantastic. You don't have to be a therapist, it just happened that way for me.
Yeah, and it's all about relationship, right?
Mhm.
So as we help heal the world heals us as well, it seems.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So would you like to talk a little bit about give a little teaser of what people might expect on Saturday coming to the workshop?
Well, I can do that. I'm going to have a few experiential activities. We will probably do a little activity regarding of evolving the nervous system. I have some activities too around, showing the work that connects in the spiral that I had mentioned, that we both talked about. And also we'll be sitting in a circle on the stage of the amphitheater. And we may go into smaller groups to have some discussions around honoring our pain, and then see how we can see the world with new eyes and go forth. So, nutshell.
So what does it mean to live like a mountain?
Living like a mountain is just, for me, I often use different items that I see on strolls and saunters and walks around Idyllwild that may show up. I'd like to embody that. Okay. And it may not always be so strong and sturdy, but I think of the storms that the mountain has weathered. I think of the fires. I think of the full moons and eclipses and everything that the mountain has seen and witnessed. I do that with trees as well, and the winds and the storms, and they're still standing, right? And they acknowledge those things and they accept those things. And so to live like a mountain would maybe be to embrace all of it, right? And go forth, you know. Sometimes I will have people, one of the practices of SE is around a competent protector, or something that you can, real or imagined, that you'd like to accompany you in, say, in times that, it could be a past traumatic experience, or it could be moving into maybe you have to go do something that you're nervous about, or, so you bring that competent protector along with you, or you embody it. And that could be maybe I'll just stand like a mountain for a little while. I got this, right? And just it's just, that was just kind of a catchy little thing. But it is very much what I have found living here, that there might be certain creatures, and some of the eco-psychology work that I do is around taking people outside, having sessions outdoors. I used to have an office here. I don't anymore. I take people outside. And when we are outside, maybe a bird shows up, or maybe a tree branch falls, and use those things in the natural environment to say, hey, is there something you might need to let go of? That just kind of happened. And, just kind of using elements from nature to be my co-therapists.
Hmm. Would you, given the recent events, the fire followed by hurricane, is there anything that you would want to say to people who've just come through that?
Well, I mean, I think that's, we're all okay, but it's part of living here. But I also feel that the sense of community that comes up in those events, as well as, like, are you okay? People texting, calling, offering help, offering, we didn't have to evacuate this time, but just seeing people pull together to, I also think that the hurricane piece, or that, was somewhat, I don't know, miraculous. It, like, all of a sudden it was fall, like like it blew in all these then now it's been chilly, and it rained, and it was just, thank you. I mean, it's like the heavens opened and just doused the fire. So I mean, I think that I don't want to go as far as say, but good people. I mean, there's good people here, and I think in some ways, I don't know, I don't really have much to say, other than I know it can be difficult, but I always think that there's a sense of possibility, or a sense of, and it was proven, and it showed itself over the fire, and then the storm. I mean, it was pretty amazing how that all happened. So I think, and I also think that with fire being, yes, it is scary, but there is a renewal, right, around that. There are new plants and bushes from the fire 4 years ago that would never have even grown if there hadn't been a fire, right? So yes, it's sad, and I'm, very sad for people that lose homes and lives and so forth, but there is also that rebirth and full circle kind of thing that happens, spiral thing that happens even with fires. So
these are fire adapted plant communities, and fire has been suppressed for a long time. So we're kind of witnessing some of the downsides of that strategy, and the need to approach the local wildlands.
I mean, fires were part of the indigenous world. I mean, they lit things on fire on purpose.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think we just have to stop messing with stuff,
Yeah.
But anyway.
So would you like to add anything? This has been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for participating. Yeah.
You're very welcome, and it's been a pleasure. I think I'd like to just add that, I don't want people to feel that we're just going to sit there and grieve on Saturday. Okay. So, I mean, I just want people to understand that it's an important process, and plants and animals grieve all the time. Right. And I think that culturally, it's an important emotion, or it actually contains a multitude of emotions, but it's beautiful. It's how much we love is how much we grieve. And so I just don't want people to be frightened about coming, because but it's just and it's not all about that. So it's an important thing, but it's also the idea. And two, with the trauma piece, it's also so fascinating that the trauma is not necessarily in the event. Okay. It's in the body, and how the body deals with that. So I just want to mention that too. That's something that Peter often says. And so there, you can heal that. Anyway, I look forward to it. I'm excited. My cat just jumped up on the table. I'm excited to be there. I'm excited to be outside. It was so interesting that the workshop, the 1 week that I could do it, was the week that it got to be outside. I was like, this is perfect. So anyway, meant to be.
Well, we're really grateful that you're participating, and yeah, very much looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mark.